So my name is Ahmed Uzair. I'm a lawyer by profession. I like to think of myself as somebody who thinks thinks beyond the law and likes to partner with companies. I like to operate in a way that. No, I don't have. So I like to operate in a way that I put my business hat on and I would understand the business problem that a startup is looking to solve or a business is looking to solve, and I work towards that. And in that sense, this conversation is less about law, and I think that's quite boring anyway, and more about the business problems and business challenges that a startup can potentially face in Pakistan. And I would like to start off this conversation with you by sharing a small story. In the 1960s, Silicon Valley was the hub of innovation, especially in the technology sector. And the reason for that innovation was the collaborative approach that was taken by people who were living there, staying there. And I like to think, obviously I wasn't there, but I like to think that they were operating in a bubble. So while there were challenges all around, the way the residents of that area were looking at solving global problems was innovative and collaborative. I like to think that what we have here in Pakistan is a mini example of Silicon Valley. So obviously we're not there yet. We don't have multi-billion-dollar businesses yet. But I believe that, and in my interactions with various national incubation centers, as well as incubation centers or ORICs in different universities, what I found is that there is a certain sense of camaraderie. There is a term that is often described about business in Pakistan, and that is Pakistan is a low-trust society. In essence, people don't like to share their ideas. People don't like to talk about their business. They like to hold their business to themselves or ideas to themselves, and they don't like to talk about the experiences or learnings that they have. That's true for the wider economy, but I feel, and I've experienced it, that there is a opposite of that in the bubble that you guys are all operating under. So if you as a budding entrepreneur go up to a competitor of yours who is doing something in the same field, and you actually in good faith have a conversation about the challenges that business owner is also facing, you would generally expect an honest response, a feedback, a conversation that is more collaborative. There are always bad actors. There were probably a lot of bad actors or some bad actors in the 1960s Silicon Valley as well. And therefore, we continue to hear, as lawyers, we get to hear those bad stories and bad examples from time to time. But I like to believe that we are operating, and we should help cultivate that environment of collaboration. It's less about competing with each other. It's more about raising the overall ecosystem. And as the ecosystem grows, everybody else benefits. Now let me give you a second example of this. And again, from a legal and lawyer's perspective, while Uber's acquisition of Careem is simply a simple acquisition transaction, but what it ushered in the ecosystem was a number of founders who used to work in Careem, were attuned to the environment that was the collaborative business that was being undertaken at Careem, and it has resulted in nearly a dozen startups in the last 18 months. Now, it has become a bit of a cliche, so I don't want to harp on the same company too much. But the point I'm making to you is that the collaborative approach is when the whole industry, the whole ecosystem grows. Now, let me change the track a little bit and share with you all a little bit of a background over the last 3 years, what has happened in the ecosystem. I'm a lawyer, so my lens is legal, and please hear what I'm saying in that context. But we like to think, at least I like to think, that many of the successes and many of the startups that we have seen in the last 18 months are a function of many of the regulatory changes that were made in the last 3 years. Maybe there was a lot of confluence of other business, commercial aspects, but there was definitely an interest by the state, by the regulators, to facilitate this ecosystem. Now, let me give you a couple of concrete examples. In 2018, when soon after the new government came into power, they wanted to have a fresh look at many of the laws that existed. Now, while there were some failed or wasted energy, I generally found the stakeholders to be quite receptive. So in my own experience, I'm telling you that we suggested some reforms, and there was a genuine desire to listen, and there was a genuine desire to hear what those concerns were, and they were ultimately addressed in one form or the other. For example, in 2020, changes to the Companies Act were introduced and passed by the Parliament, which encouraged employee stock options, which facilitated or permitted employee stock options, sweat equity, issuance of shares on consideration other than cash. These kind of changes to the law ultimately allowed many of the startups to issue stock options, offer, or at least make it acceptable in the ecosystem that this is something that the law allows. Secondly, the State Bank facilitated many of the startups by allowing, or basically changed the law, changed the regulations, by allowing a startup to set up a holding company outside of Pakistan. In the last 12 months or 18 months, the few $100 million that have come in are in many ways a function of that facilitation. Many of the investors don't want to go through the hassle of becoming a shareholder in a Pakistani company because of the laborious process that it entails. However, they were more comfortable becoming shareholders in let's say, a Singapore company or a UAE company or even a Delaware company. The result of this has been that a lot of investment was made possible in the ecosystem because of those regulatory changes. Now, I want to talk about some bad experiences as well, because I don't want this to be a one-sided story. I do feel that there were many resistance and many challenges as well. A good example is tax. Now, many tax breaks were promised, but ultimately revoked. For example, in 2021, a tax to limited partners of venture capital funds was withdrawn after it had been issued back in 2016. That revocation of that tax exemption was at the time apparently because of the insistence of the IMF, but it created a bad taste. And whenever I was having those conversations with potential investors, they would articulate that the whole state is not trustworthy, right? So you promise something, and in the middle of it all, you take that right back, and it created a bad taste. Another example is some of the procedural challenges that many startups face when it comes to, for example, the approvals, whether it is at the SECP level or at the State Bank level. So many of those resistance and frustrations still exist. And I guess we are all used to working in this environment, so we know that's the cost of doing business in Pakistan. Ultimately, as a lawyer, I believe in the ecosystem that we are operating in. And I have tried very hard over the years to work in this ecosystem, to facilitate the ecosystem. And I hope that a few of potentially budding entrepreneurs and unicorn founders are sitting in this room. Thank you very much.